Hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil Live. I'm Mike King. It's really nice to see you all here. I apologize for short notice. This is kind of what I do on these lives. I just get kind of a burr under my saddle, I guess, and decide it's time to jump on. But it's really nice to see you folks on. I want to especially thank our mods who I've tried to be a little more considerate and give you some notice when I decide to do this, and we're working on a way of getting better at that. But really nice to be with you. Take a minute and we'll shout out a few of you who are here. La Quinta Haynes, nice to see you. Sophia H, again, thank you so much for all that you do. Miss Sophia. Sam Costa, nice to see you. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Getting x-rays. I hope it's nothing serious. Probably a dumb thing to say when you're getting x-rays, but hopefully you're doing all right. LM, great to see you. Barb Nauman, nice to see you. Thank you for joining in. Kelly Finalo, JRJRS, Miss Sophia. I'm on my own. The back office, they have jobs. Thankfully, mine was wrapping up and I was able to jump on and do this. Let's see. And by the way, I want to keep this really relaxed today. If you've got questions, let's please get them in there and I'll try to answer as we go through. I just wanted to explore this case with you today. It was really a pretty troubling case, and yet seems like it's pretty clear cut in some ways. Sam Costa, I agree. We're having way too many killings. We'll explore this in detail. I want to also just take a minute and thank those of you who are channel members, those of you who provide super chats. That's all really wonderful and very kind. And I hope you all have considered signing up for the podcasts and that you're finding those to be beneficial. There are 2 podcasts that you can sign up for. One, go to your favorite podcast platform. The first is Profiling Evil. The second is our newly launched podcast in Southeast Asia, but obviously around the world, called Mapping Evil with Mike King. And that has jumped to number 5 in Australia, which is really exciting. So thanks to our friends down under. Deborah Chase, nice to see you. And let's see if there are any questions. And I'll tell you, I'm trying to get better at reading these so that I can answer questions as they get going. Mom Jeans and Crime Scenes, great to see you here. Paul's Lawn Care, hi. So let's talk a little bit about this case that happened and explore some of the weird and wacky things that are going on in this particular case. And I thought maybe the best way to start off about talking is just play a news report. So I'm going to pull that up and we're going to play a news report that I think is pretty comprehensive and then talk about it from there. So let me just pull that up. And we'll play this.
Tonight, a violent night across the area. A total of 8 people killed in 3 separate shootings, all at massage parlors.
Now, we just got the mugshot of the man authorities say is connected to all of the shootings. Take a look. He is 21-year-old Robert Aaron Long. There is much to figure out. So here is what we know right now. The first shooting occurred off Highway 92 in Cherokee County. 4 people died there. Another was taken to the hospital.
And a short time later, Atlanta police were called to shootings at 2 separate massage parlors in Midtown. A total of 4 people were killed. Let's get you straight to 11 Alive's John Sherrick, who is live for us in Cherokee County. Now, John, we know that the suspect was actually caught in South Georgia.
Correct. And it didn't take long for investigators to connect all 8 homicides at all 3 crime scenes to the same suspect. Investigators say video surveillance at all 3 crime scenes show the same man and the same car. The suspect, 21-year-old Robert Aaron Long of Cherokee County here north of Atlanta, arrested in South Georgia tonight in Crisp County, spotted driving on I-75. Now, investigators say that late this afternoon, Long walked into Young's Asian Massage on Highway 92 near Bells Ferry in Cherokee County and opened fire, killing 3 women and 1 man. 2 people witnessed it, according to Captain Jay Baker. And Baker says, again, there is video surveillance here and also at the crime scenes in Atlanta.
Well, we had really good information about his vehicle, and of course, cameras are everywhere now. So, from what I understand, they were comparing the images of the suspect and his vehicle and tag information and all that with what they have down there, and that's how we came to the conclusion that he was also a suspect in Atlanta.
Now, it's a drive of about 30 miles south to Atlanta, and detectives believe Robert Aaron Long then drove to Cheshire Bridge and Piedmont in northeast Atlanta and went into 2 massage spas across the street from each other, across Piedmont from each other, the Gold Spa and Aromatherapy Spa. They say Long shot and killed 3 women at Gold Spa and 1 woman at Aromatherapy. Nasarima Marcel works at a nearby business, and interim Atlanta Police Chief Rodney Bryant was at the scene monitoring the investigation.
Since 12, a few hours ago, we just heard numerous gunshots coming from across the street. They wouldn't let us out. Of course, I want to know what's going on. My car's out here. I want to make sure everyone's safe. They weren't letting us out.
We do have confirmed 3 people shot and killed at one location. 1 person shot across the street and killed at that location. Right now, it appears that all victims are female.
Now, detectives are not discussing yet any possible motives. They say nothing appears to have been stolen. Now, authorities are saying that 2 of the 4 people killed here in Cherokee County were Asian women, and Atlanta police say all 4 of the women killed in Atlanta were Asian. So one aspect of this investigation is trying to determine if it might have been racially motivated. Again, they're not saying that yet, but they are confirming that that is one aspect of their investigation, an investigation that is now just getting underway.
So that actually is just a little bit old, because what we've learned over the course of last night and today, and the suspect has cooperated to some degree and talked with law enforcement, is that according to police and the suspect's opinion, the crimes were not racially or ethnicity based, but that it seems to have boiled down to the fact that there was a sex addiction, and for some reason that's tying into that. Now, that is in no way alleging that there were illegal sex acts occurring in any of these massage parlors, although that has happened in other massage parlors across the country. But what is clear is that the suspect in this case was apparently, based on his testimony, involved in a sexual addiction that led to much of this. Now, I think this is kind of interesting, and I'll continue to monitor your questions here as we go through. But one thing that I thought was very interesting was, as I did a little research, of course, this is the image of the suspect in police custody. And one thing that I think is kind of interesting is to go back in time. I want to go back 2 years in time and look at an image where he is actually here we go. In this image here, he actually has just been baptized into a local church in the area, and is expressing his belief system at that point. And the thing that I think is really interesting is if there is by any chance this real good and evil kind of battle going on in this kid's mind, where he's been trying to do good and beat his addiction and his perversions, and then of course decides that this might be an easier way to get rid of the temptations that he feels and succumbs to. Now, Ann Anderson, I agree with you 100%, and I'm going to put that up. This is no excuse for murder, and I hope in no way that what I'm saying is suggesting that. One of the things that we try to do when we're looking at these kinds of cases is to analyze the victimology. And outside of there was a white woman and a white man who were killed in the first assault, but everyone seems to be across the board. Nothing seems to be changing, that the victims in this case, as the targeted victim, were Asian females who worked in these centers. In 1967, Rhonda, thank you so much for that kind super chat. That's very nice of you, and really appreciate it. So what we do is we start to look at the victimology, and while law enforcement pieced this together quite quickly, I think it would have become evident to everybody in Georgia as they looked at this and saw how many people did this. Now, there have been some folks who have been asking about the vest, and I think Deborah Chase is talking about Ron last night on his channel, talking about that it's a breakaway vest that is used to control him in custody. So yeah, the vest is really not that big a deal. It's just part of what they do, especially if there's a concern from a suicide watch standpoint. One thing I do want to clarify that I want to make sure everyone understands, because I've heard what I believe is some misrepresentation of what kind of a killer this was. I've heard people online and in other locations saying that this was a mass murderer. It's not a mass murderer. There's a very specific category. And if you think back to just a few weeks ago, and if you get a moment, go back to Profiling Evil and just type in and search for the videos we've been doing on spree murders. You can also get the podcasts with Special Agent Mark Safrick on spree murders. Now, these spree murders traditionally have been categorized within the mass and serial or multicide type homicide cases, but really they've been classified out very specifically, and this case fits a spree killer perfectly. Spree killings involve the killing of at least 3 people, and it has to happen at 2 or more different locations due to some kind of a precipitating event that's fueling this urge to kill. And so as you think about this particular case, just keep in mind that it perfectly fits spree killer, and this is a spree killer. He went to 3 different locations. The question would be, would there be more locations if he had continued on? One of the other things that kind of troubled me as I did some research online is the greater community that we're all a part of. And I wanted to just share one other image that I found online that I found really disturbing. And that was this particular image from a not politically correct channel where people were praising this guy for going out and committing these kinds of horrible acts. I'm going to read this bottom one. On behalf of all self-respecting white men, I would like to thank this white man for redeeming our holy name from this vile, shameful treason. This is absolutely wacko thinking. And I just, at the risk of making someone unhappy with me out there, I think that is absolutely abhorrent that anyone would speak that way. about this kind of event. These people were contributing to their community and certainly didn't deserve to be murdered and especially in the way that they were. Now, I want to just take a minute and, like I often do, look at this a little bit from a map perspective and maybe talk through what happened, just to kind of help you capture, or maybe even help me capture in my mind, everything that went on in this particular case. So what I want to do is just pull up a map here. And I think I'll go full page on the map, and we'll explore this a little bit and talk about what happened in this particular case, hoping that it might lend some credibility. So again, we're talking about a suspect. I don't generally like to name the suspect, but again, I want to mention this is a serial spree killer. This is a spree killer. His name is Robert Aaron Long. He's 21 years old. And like we often see in these kinds of cases, relatively a nobody out there. It looks like he likes weapons. He was wearing a hat in one of the photographs that we see where he's a bow hunter, undoubtedly a bow hunter or a hunter of some kind. But let's kind of zoom into his hometown first and foremost. Now, I've kind of shaded where his home is to protect his family. They certainly don't deserve to be punished by anyone. And I think this is another area that it really troubles me when I see other enthusiasts out there going to victims' homes, offenders' homes, family of homes, trying to get that video that's going to get a bunch of views or something. It's just inappropriate. But he attended a local church. This is all public information that I'm releasing. Actually, I was on the phone with former Georgia State investigators and talking through some of this, just validating that I understood some things accurately. But at about age 19, this guy finds religion and he gets baptized into his local Christian church. Now, where things start ramping up is yesterday at 5 p.m., he travels over to the Young's Asian massage parlor and goes inside and starts shooting and kills 4 people, injuring a 5th person. The victims end up being 2 Asian women, 1 white woman, and 1 white male. And you can see, I mean, this is a pretty busy place. It's on a major road. It's interesting. I don't know whether he entered from the front or the back, but and I don't know that they are fully disclosing yet the weapon, so I'm not going to say the weapon. But again, would the weapon be easy to conceal or something that everyone would have seen? From there, now this is only a few minutes drive from his home. So clearly he's taken on, if in fact he's gone there for purposes of his sex addiction or other things, as public records are now starting to suggest, it's pretty risky for him, even in the same community where he's going to church. But again, he's going in for a massage, not necessarily a sex act. So maybe it's not as risky as to me it seems. But from there, he makes a 33-minute drive down to Atlanta. And at 5:47 p.m., so 47 minutes later, and again, take away 33 of those minutes. So it shows you how quickly he's moving from location to location, how quickly he moved from the Young Spa down. He shows up and comes to the Gold Massage Spa. Again, I haven't heard whether he enters through the front or the back door, whether, it's visible on that roadway, but the traffic conditions at 5:47 are pretty heavy. So again, it makes you wonder how many people could have seen something. He enters the Gold Massage Spa, where he executes 3 Asian women there. Again, imagine the horrendous scene that police ended up pulling up on. He then goes across the street to the aromatherapy spa, where he kills another Asian female. Now, from there, I don't know how long he may have spent there again. Those are things that I think are going to be really interesting to learn as this case unfolds. But from there, he then starts southward and travels about 3 hours, because about 6 o'clock, he's leaving the crime scene number 3. And somewhere in Crisp County on I-75, police are chasing him, and they conduct a pit maneuver. Now, a pit maneuver, and you've seen it on TV, I'm sure, but a pit maneuver is where the pursuing officers will pull alongside the suspect just at the tail end. So if this is the suspect's vehicle, the police will pull their vehicle up to about this position and then drive and crash their car into the back of the vehicle they're pursuing. And so as they're coming up the road, what that does is it forces a spin and forces the vehicle to lose control. It's only done in really serious cases. They clearly had evidence to support that this was their guy, and they made that move. So they conduct the pit maneuver around 9 p.m. So if we were to map that all out, what it ended up showing was that the distance between Atlanta, so if we look at this map again here, the distance between the second and third shooting in Atlanta and the location where the pit maneuver was conducted is a 2.5 hour drive under perfect conditions. So this was about 3 hours. So it could take into account maybe stopping or anything else he may have done. Now, the thing that becomes interesting as we discuss that then is, what did he do in that 30 minutes time? And one thing that I thought you might be interested in is these red points on the map are all of the other like businesses to the 3 businesses where people were killed. And so we can see as he comes down the freeway, he would have passed several other spas that were Asian oriented, and that's by the name of the business and the description in what the business does, massage and spa. If this were in fact a racially motivated crime, I wonder if we would have seen more along the way instead of what we see happening in his own neck of the woods within driving distance of his home. Now, the thing that will become interesting is, as law enforcement investigates this case, to go, again, the red points are all other Asian spas or similar spas that have some mention in online articles that they are Asian run or provide an Asian therapy system. So again, it'll be interesting to see what they learn and how many of these were frequented by this suspect as he went about chasing his perversion. Now, some of you may not feel like it's a perversion. So to those, I apologize. I'm not attacking you. For me, it's pretty out there. So anyway, that's what we know to this point. We know that the police chief, who is interim, meaning he is waiting to be appointed, the previous police chief, if you look at any of the articles, stepped down recently. And he indicated that information had come out in the interviews. And also, I believe the jail commander indicated that information has come out that suggests that he says it was not racially motivated, but that it was specific to his addiction and his sex addiction. So the thing that becomes interesting is to try to understand the mindset of the offender, and the victim selection process. Was he going after individuals that he specifically knew, and why? And that's going to become really interesting as the case unfolds. So, hats off to the folks in law enforcement throughout Georgia. They did a great job. Hats off to businesses that have security cameras in place, because that's what tied this thing together so quickly. Forensics will tie it together. Eyewitness statement will tie it together. But again, really a great job, and what a way to settle down a community to get him into custody. You'll notice in many areas of the country, from Seattle to New York City, police agencies were looking at the Asian community and making sure that there were extra patrols and that people were watched out for there. So, Shyla, what makes someone just pop off one day and do these things? You know, it's really interesting to me from a behavioral standpoint. What we've seen over and again is that before something can be physically acted out, it needs to be mentally reconciled. That means that we have to somehow in our mind say, this is acceptable for me to do this. By golly, I'm justified. I'm angry. If you remember his words today, I had a bad day. Oh, well, holy cow. Who doesn't have a bad day? But you folks don't go out and commit 8 murders. So we step back from that and we talk about this process of what happens in the human mind. And everything that I'm saying, I've learned through training, learning how to profile cases, through my own personal experiences, through my undergraduate and graduate work, which was not in psychology, by the way, but dealt with criminal behavior at the graduate level. But what we know is that that our fantasies drive our decisions. If you think about, even for those of you that are believers of the Bible, everything is first created in the mind. When God was designing the earth, it was created in the mind before it was physically created, for those who believe in the Bible. When you decide, I'm going to go turn off a light, you first create in your mind the image, I'm going to turn off a light, and then you physically act it out. So when I hear people say, I just snapped and it happened, I have a real hard time with that, because we don't just snap and go and kill people. Now, there are cases where people have reacted, trying to save their own life or others. But this fantasy process is very big in the decision processes that are made. I would bet if manifestos are released, if being able to see what's shown on his computer is released, if his friends are truthful in discussions that they've had, if targets that he's put in on the target range when shooting his gun and practicing, all of those things, I would bet we would see things that indicate a propensity to do something like this, that there was fantasy. And eventually, the thing about fantasy is never satisfying enough for people. We have to act out our fantasies. And that's what's so dangerous, and why we can catch serial predators, quite frankly, is because they fantasize about something until they can no longer stand it and they act it out. Now, almost always, the reality of what they act out falls short of what the fantasy was. And so the offender has to go back and start working through the fantasy again and figuring out what went wrong. The fantasy then builds again, and then they feel this responsibility to themselves to act it out. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to that question. But I am not a believer in the devil made me do it. I'm not a believer in it just happened. I think that we cognitively make a decision before we physically act out. And people that don't want to be responsible for their actions might try to blame the devil, but I don't. So anyway, And I'm grateful. It looks like the back office did make it here. So if there are any other questions that you can see there that I need to answer, I'd be happy to do that. Marilyn Kuman Mills, I hope I said that right. Bad day is a relevant term, so different to so many different people, and absolutely. But I'll tell you what, I would bet in this group of people on this list that you all have had a bad day, but I would put my last year's paycheck on the fact that probably none of you went out and killed 8 people because you were having a bad day. This is really frightening when our mindsets get to this point. And what happens so often, in my opinion, in these cases, is people who live a rather mundane life choose this course of action because it gives them the ability to suddenly become someone. Can you imagine having that be your mindset, that this being someone who took this many lives would give you a legacy that you're proud of? And yet for some people, that's absolutely true. So let's see here. This is interesting. Vicki, I want to stick this up. Vicki Parsons, with freedom of will, he chose to do that, but with outsiders cheering them on, he felt more confident to do that. Isn't that the truth? And that's what's so frightening when we look at that website that I pulled up, that there are people that are cheering this kind of behavior. It is really frightening, and why we, as hopefully good human beings, stand up and fight for the downtrodden. Let me see. Sageti Nona says, prayers to the friends and family. So where does imagination turn to fantasy? Isn't that interesting? I think we all fantasize. It's a part of life. We, for some of you, that fantasy might be being a rock star singing at the state fairgrounds and hearing people cheer for you. For somebody else, fantasy might mean getting good grades because that's the challenge for them. So I don't want to make anyone feel weird that you have fantasies. I have fantasies, you have fantasies. The challenge becomes when our fantasies are destructive and we no longer are satisfied with the fantasy alone, and we decide that we need to act out that fantasy to get the next supercharge. And that's when it gets really, really frightening. So this will be an interesting case to watch unfold, and I don't want to belabor that tonight with you. I want to maybe answer any questions that you might have as far as how would I investigate this case? How do profilers look at this case? I want to make it very clear again. I personally disagree with any comments or publications out there that are suggesting this is a mass murderer. This is not a mass murderer. This is a spree killer. And I hope that you'll go back and listen to the podcast I had with Special Agent Mark Safrick, where we talked about spree killing, a relatively returning concept into the classification of killers like this. You also will be able to find it on YouTube, on Profiling Evil, on the discussions I have with Mark on the sessions that he is co-hosting and participating in. He also has a book called Spree Killers. It's meant more for law enforcement as a trade book, but it is just incredibly powerful. This is a spree killer. Again, a spree killer is 3 or more victims in more than 2 locations. And we saw this happen here. There are a number of cases that fit that. If you remember the mosque shootings in New Zealand, a case that I'll never forget. I happened to be in New Zealand meeting with the police commissioner down there at the time that happened. And my meeting obviously never happened because of the shooting that morning. But again, that was a spree killing. So as you think about this case, just remember, this is a spree killer, and it's going to be interesting to watch. The other thing is, think about the motivation. Number one, we know the victimology, right? Everybody feel pretty comfortable that the preferential, selected, targeted victim was Asian women working in these massage businesses. Now, there was a white male and a white female that were also murdered, and they, I think, just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's going to be really interesting to watch as this thing unfolds. Now, the question some of you have is, what could these people have done that were in these businesses? That's really a tough question. Number one, victim risk continuums kind of go out the door on this kind of a case, because the victim was at work. They didn't choose to change their level of risk, and it was the introduction, the change in circumstance of this guy coming in with a weapon and a murderous mindset that caused them to be victims. The only suggestion I would have in these kinds of cases is, if you ever have something like that happen, run and get out as quick as you can. Don't look for a place to hide unless you absolutely don't have time to get out of the building. These guys, if they're coming in an active shooting situation, they're interested in numbers, and they might be interested in one specific person in that business, but anyone else is just going to be in the way. So just run if you can. Let's see. Rain Landstrom said, what an awful and tragic day. I have to agree with that. I think a young man like that can do that so easily. I'd be curious to know how he got to the state. I don't know if he's had mental health evaluations. It is just terribly tragic that happened. So let me see. Dan N asks, so from what I heard you say, that would mean a cop making a split-second decision to shoot a suspect would come from a fantasy of shooting a suspect. What an interesting question. And Dan, I'm gonna actually take this one on, because no, you're absolutely wrong. The difference is, a police officer, and I'm speaking from my own experience and those that I've been around, not the few bad apples that we've seen make some really bad mistakes, but here's the difference. A police officer in the police academy every single year on a regular basis is at the range training on how to use a weapon and use that to stop an imminent threat against them or someone else. They have to make a mental decision in their mind. And this is something that you do as a police officer, that if certain criteria are met, that you are then authorized to use lethal force. So no, they're not fantasizing about killing someone. What they're doing is they're training that when certain things happen, and that's why you always see the question come up about training, that when certain things happen, the officer is then authorized to use deadly force. Some may choose not to. Sometimes you have things like cover or concealment that make it possible for you to have an extra second or two to think through that decision. But as one who has fired his weapon in the line of duty, I can tell you that I didn't think for a second about what to do. I made that decision years earlier on the range, in legal training, in the police academy, and other locations, to know when it was appropriate to make that step over the edge. And then it wasn't done without some really fast decision making of, do I have adequate cover, or am I in imminent danger, or is someone else in imminent danger? So I hope that helps with that question, because I think it's a really interesting question. But I want you to know there is an absolute difference between someone like this who fantasizes about going out and killing someone, and a police officer who trains to be able to use the weapon under the right circumstances. And whether we like it or not, if you watched my court TV show last night with Vinnie Politan last night, there was a Nashville police officer who was finally forced to shoot back at a victim. Now, there are lots of people that could question all of the things that happened up until that moment. But when that threat was presented and he was shot and people shooting at him, he returned fire. I don't know. VP, thank you for that kind donation. He bought the gun that day. How does that fit? That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. It will be interesting to see what access he has to other weapons. And maybe you could fill us in, VP, on whether that was purchased in a store after a background check or from somebody else on the street. But yeah, interesting. It's going to be, there are a lot of questions, and I wish I had more time to study these cases in great detail to figure out all the ins and outs of them. But it is going to be interesting to see how some of this comes down the pike. So Willow indicated that she thinks that he was blaming Asian women for his sexual problems, and may have tied that to religion. Again, that'll be interesting to know what's going on there, what the motivation was. But I've seen this with other killers, and it's been something in particular that we see it with a lot of serial killers, where they try in public to say, I was so offended by this sex trade workers out there, doing what they do, that I was just ridding the world of them or whatever. Holy cow, what messed up thinking these people have in to try to justify that in any possible way. LM says he bought the 9mm that day, just a few hours beforehand. Again, do we know, was it purchased in a store after a background check? Because that's kind of important too, because it gives us some idea of the planning going on and whether he thought he would get away with it. It could have been that there were all kinds of plans to go out in a blazing gun battle or something else. So this will be interesting to see how this unfolds. And it will be really interesting to see if more of the confession comes out. So, all right. We'll continue to watch this. We'll come back and maybe visit it again, or I'll do a public record on it as we see more information come out. I'm going to watch just a little bit further in here and see if any other questions pop up that I can answer. If you have put one up, I'm sorry, maybe the mods, if you see one, you can broadcast it or something, force me to see it. I wish I caught all of these a little more quickly. I do want to remind you of a couple of things. The Profiling Evil podcast and the Mapping Evil podcast. Please go to your favorite podcast platform and listen to those. Today, we just barely, a few hours ago, released the interview that I did with Vinnie Politan of Court TV. What a wonderful man he is, and what a good friend. I think you'll really enjoy his interview. So make sure you check that out, as well as the other interviews, including the one on spree killers that we've been talking about. We had a great choir practice on Monday. I hope you go back and watch that. If you are inclined, go to the website. You can see more information on the Deceived book. And let's see here. Rose, Rose, I wonder if you're from outside of the U.S., because you're saying U.S. needs to toughen its gun laws. I am in almost daily communication with my colleagues in Australia on things, and they just are so astounded at the number of gun violations that we have. It would be difficult to disagree with you that if there were no guns, it would be hard to see gun crimes happening, but that's not going to happen in the United States for a long time, I think. I'm a gun owner, and I grew up hunting. Please don't hold that against me. I personally have a very difficult time with semi-automatic weapons, and recognizing the need in those for hunting or sport shooting, but I certainly don't want to go after the people that responsibly do enjoy that. It is going to be interesting to see how the U.S. continues to work through this challenge. I don't know that our history won't show what our future might look like, but it will be interesting. So let's see. One thing that I'd like to end on, because it was very difficult. Well, I want to just comment on something. Let me see if I can find this now. Things are kind of shooting by quickly. Well, I missed it. A few people were offended by my question on Sarah Everard and whether there were things that she could have done to minimize her level of risk. I just want to share with all of you that in no way was that pointed as a further attack on Sarah or on any other woman who ends up having to make decisions to walk down a street or anywhere else. I was trying to be very practical about, are there things that we can do as individuals? And I used myself as an example. Recently, I was in Washington, D.C., in a rather rough part of town. And I got out of meetings late at night and it was dark and I had a short half a mile walk to my hotel room. And I thought to myself, do I, as what I think is a pretty capable human being, an adult, do I want to walk through this neighborhood by myself, or do I want to spend the $10 and get an Uber and have them drop me off at my hotel? And I chose to take the Uber. And all I'm saying in this is that as you make decisions, as you leave a residence like Sarah at 9 o'clock at night for a 1-hour walk through city streets, think about what the risk is that you're taking, and then make a decision based on a risk. But think about, are there better solutions to reduce my risk? Taking a cab, having a friend drive me, getting someone to walk with me, those kinds of things. Now, there are circumstances involved in her case that are going to be really hard to argue and defend. Who wouldn't respond to a police officer badging them and saying, you got to get in my car, especially with the pressures of COVID and everything else? You got to get off the street. Doesn't make sense to me as a police officer, but I can see how we might respond to that. So please don't try to make some of these things out as an attack. All I'm trying to do is suggest that there's more that we could do as human beings to mitigate our own risk by thinking through what the choices are and then making a choice. Now, the other thing I got a little bit beat up on was saying that she was murdered allegedly by this police officer. And people are saying, what do you mean allegedly? And he was a police officer. No, the appropriate thing to do until someone's convicted is to say that it's alleged that they committed a crime. We might all have different feelings, but our responsibility is to I think, take a little higher road. So please forgive me if I offended you, but recognize my mindset hasn't changed any. Are there things that Sarah or other victims could do that would have minimized their risk? And can we all learn from that? I'm going to try to spend a little time and do some research and maybe prepare a video or two just talking through this process of the victim risk continuum and ways in which we can mitigate our own risk. But again, please know that there was never any intention. That beautiful young woman did not deserve to have that happen. And I just am so sorry that she fell victim, and that we continue to see victims day in and day out around the world. It's a horrible thing. Well, so let me just I'm gonna stare at the comments for just a moment. If you have something you want to bring up, and we'll talk about those. Deborah Fuqua, I'm so sorry if I have really made a disaster of that, but thank you for your comments. A long question regarding a felon shooting a police officer. Oh, you're mentioning that the police officer passed away this week. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That is a terrible situation. This is a serious business, and I'm going to be talking a little bit in a few weeks about how challenging that can be at times for those of us who are true crime buffs trying to listen and participate in all of this. We'll spend a little time on that. Okay, let's see. Thank you. Thank you, Lila. Says she didn't take offense. I really appreciate that, because again, I don't want anybody to be offended, and yet I do want people to think and to also take ownership for decisions that they're making, recognizing what they might do for themselves or against themselves. Let's see. Jan Dances says regarding Sarah, let me pull this up. Why have we not had any TV, her parents, etc.? You know, this is interesting. I actually talked to Dr. Spencer Cheney, who is a British PhD that does geographic profiling. And I spoke with Dr. Monckton Smith, who you may remember, who is a DV expert out of the UK, about this case. And there's a different level in the UK about professionals talking about cases until they've been adjudicated. I don't know how that extends into the press, because we see some pretty invasive things with the press and the royal family and others. And I'm not getting political in any way, but I don't know what is appropriate in the UK. And maybe our friends who are British citizens could share maybe why we're not seeing a lot in regard to family or others talking out. Misha Oliver is a new member. Thank you for joining up, Misha. Welcome aboard. Let's see. Now, this question, what religion was he, Mike? How many died in the spree? Jeannie, if we're talking about Long, the killer, he was a Christian, and the name of his church is online that he was baptized into. Again, I don't want to bring it up, although I made a mistake of putting it up in the video earlier. But 8 people died in the spree. 1 is still in the hospital. So that's what we know at this time. So let's see. Oh, by the way, hi, Glowing Ember. Nice to see you on. And Betty Smith, nice to see you. Charlie Hammond. Let's see. Oh, if you read the chats, you'll see the church he belonged to in there. So you can go through the chats. And anyway, I've taken enough of your time. You guys are so kind to take out of your day and join in. And I hope you have a great evening. Thanks for your support of Profiling Evil. Christina Gonzalez, thank you so much. Yeah, I saw that Timmy Olson didn't get parole. So that's great. Those of you who missed our choir practice on Monday night, go back and watch that. We talked about a new bill that in cases where missing persons, in homicide cases, like in the Dante Lucas case we just witnessed with Kelsey Schelling, if the body isn't recovered, this legislation requires the offender to participate with law enforcement in recovering the body before they're eligible for parole. Amazing bill. It was really great and fun to be on the channel with the bill sponsor, the senator who sponsored that, also with Dave Colley, who is the creator of the Cold podcast. So anyway, happy St. Patrick's Day to you, Sam, and everyone else. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support of Profiling Evil, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday night. Again, watch for the Profiling Evil podcast that just came out. It's going to be a good one. Go back and watch some of the old ones, and we'll see you on Monday night. Thanks so much.